I never want to work another day in my life. How much money do I need for that?
I think crores.
What this FIRE movement is?
So if you look at the two parts, it's FI, that's financial independence, and RE is retire early. If you have like 25 times of your expenses as a corpus, that's enough to retire. But what's very interesting is
Ritesh Sabharwal is a certified financial planner with over 16 years of experience in the financial services industry, having worked with organizations like JP Morgan, BlackRock, and EY. He is an active content creator and specializes in helping professionals make informed personal finance decisions.
If someone wants to start their FIRE journey today, what questions should they ask themselves?
the first one is, what are your values? Number two,
To give you my retirement corpus.
the first bucket will be your income bucket. Then you can have like a 25%, let's say an equity bucket, and you still have about 20-25%.
If you were to advise someone on retirement planning, how would you approach it?
The person has to really understand that what is their lifestyle right now. Now you have a number. If you keep investing, you'll meet that 8 crore number. Now, how do you decide? It might look fancy, let's retire early, all of that. Now, it requires you to definitely be disciplined. If you are, then you go on to this movement and figure it out. But
Ritesh, I never want to work another day in my life. How much money do I need for that?
now, I wish that was a very simple answer. Some might think 2 crores, 4 crores, or 6 crores. But unfortunately, it depends on a multiple factors.
Okay.
Like specifically, for example, what is the lifestyle that you want to maintain? How much are you going to live? What are the expenses that you have now? What is the inflation? And that is why I think retirement and early retirement is a very advanced topic. So there's no right answer for that, like just off the back.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about this FIRE movement, right? FIRE. It stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Can you just tell us a little bit about what this FIRE movement is and what you think about it?
So actually, FIRE was a term which was coined in 1992 by these American authors, which in their book which was launched, and since then it was a concept in America, which then got cascaded to other countries as well. Now, what it basically saying is, so if you look at the two parts, it's FI, that's financial independence, and RE is retire early. While the concept was made in the US, where they thought that if you have like 25 times of your expenses as a corpus, that's enough to retire. So the whole idea was that how can you actually retire early while being financially independent?
Because we all want to retire early.
Absolutely.
So let's stick to this 25 times your income. Can you explain that calculation to us and then tell us whether you think that actually works or not?
So actually, when this was coined, the person who coined it, he had taken the the examples and the returns from the US from a long time back. So what he did was he took a balanced portfolio, 50% equity and 50% debt, and he took assumptions of, let's say, 10.2% in equity and let's say 5% in debt, and he calculated past returns of, let's say, about 25 to 30 years, and came out with a calculation that on multiple portfolios, when you actually apply this 25 times rule, your corpus actually lasts you for the 25 to 30 years.
Okay.
But
after you retire.
Yeah, exactly. But what's very interesting is now when you put this into the concept of, let's say, an Indian arrangement, people are living longer. So this 25 to 30 is not really the kind of years that you need for retirement. It's more like 35, 40.
Okay.
As well as the returns are like based on the US markets. So it's not something which you can just take at face value and say, great, 4% and that's it, and I can use that withdrawal rate in India. So you have to make tweaks in your planning for sure.
So let's walk everyone through this calculation. I know there may be variations, but let's just stick to this 25x and then the 4% withdrawal rate. Can you take some simple numbers and tell us how this works?
Let's say you have an expense of 50,000 rupees a month, so let's say 6 lakhs a year. So if you get 25 times 6 lakhs, that's about 1.25 CR. At the time of your retirement, if you have this 1.25 CR and you can keep withdrawing the inflated amount. So let's say 1.25 you have at the end, you withdraw certain expenses per year, and your portfolio also keeps getting a return of, let's say, 4, 5, 6%. It should ideally beat inflation.
Right. So 4% of your total corpus is what you can withdraw per year if you want the money to last, 25, 30 years.
Right.
And importantly, this amount that you withdraw is inflation adjustable. So if I withdraw 50,000 per month today, I can withdraw about maybe 52,000 or something of that sort next year.
Right.
Because money loses value every year
Absolutely.
because of inflation.
Absolutely.
This may be slightly unrelated but important for the calculation. Is these days we're hearing a lot about life expectancy increasing. So do you think people should plan for maybe 90, 95-year-old, plan for retirement until they are 90, 95? Or do you think 85 is still okay as a number?
Yeah, I think as per the research that I saw, about 74 and 75 is the average life expectancy. But yes, if medical advancement is happening now, imagine in the next 20 years, that number might go up towards 80 or 85. So yes, they can plan because, someone said once, but I only want to live till 75. But that's something you can't choose. So, so that's not something you'll be able to choose.
So going with this 25-year-old's example, so they're 25 today, want to retire at 55. They come to you and they say, Ritesh, please construct my portfolio. I want to reach my FIRE number and then live off that for the rest of my life. What sort of investment portfolio would you recommend to them?
So I think, of course, I'll obviously ask a lot of other questions first, that why do you want to retire at this age and, so soon, etc. But because it's a longer period of time, first and foremost is, are they able to handle the volatility in the market is what I'm going to ask them. Because I would obviously expect them to allocate some part of their portfolio towards equity. So whether it's mutual fund or stocks, etc. And for that, there will be volatility in the next 20-25 years. And conversely, if they do not have equity in their portfolio, it's very difficult to get the corpus or, beat inflation. So it would be more in terms of some debt products wherein you have your PPF, NPS, etc. And then a mix of equity, whether it be index funds or maybe it be, hybrid funds. So it will be constructed like that based on an individual's, risk appetite and what they are thinking of.
So is there a minimum that you think 25-year-olds should have in equity in their portfolio?
If we are talking specifically for retirement, I mean, there's no exact minimum. I mean, it's, like they say in personal finance, it's very difficult to put one size fits all application. But I think when you're younger, 50-60% in equities doable because of the fact that you have a longer term period. So there was a study done that if you hold your investments for over 7 years, again, past data, you're more likely never to lose money. And then there are probabilities that you make more than 10-12% because without that, you're not going to beat inflation.
Right. But can you expect to make, let's say, 12% if you have only 50 or 60% in equity?
I mean, you can make 12% on that 50% allocation. You can also make, it again depends. Like for a longer period of time, you look at small cap, mid cap and large cap. So small caps will outperform, but you would also want to have some stability in the portfolio, especially towards your retirement age. So this is also one thing I'll actually add that let's say the person wanted to retire at 55. So 10 years before their retirement, I would always advise a little bit of their portfolio to move from equity, let's say 3% every year. And towards the end, they have a higher allocation towards debt so that they're able to sustain that.
Yeah, so one concept I think it will be nice for people to understand also is this difference between the accumulation phase and the withdrawal phase. So when you're actually putting money in, let's say through your SIP, then you're accumulating your wealth, putting it in the market, letting it grow, let it compound every year. And then once you reach your FIRE number, whatever your retirement number is, then you want to start withdrawing from that. It could be through an SWP in a mutual fund. So many times I've seen people confuse the two. They think that a portfolio is a portfolio. I mean, it's the same thing. And what's the best portfolio? But it actually needs to be which phase are you in? What kind of return profile do you want? And maybe let's talk a little bit about risk profiling as well.
Right. So like I said, when someone is constructing a retirement portfolio, they have to invest for, let's say, 20-25 years. Now, let's say a big event happens. Let's say there's a crisis or there's a war or there is like COVID. Now, if your portfolio shrinks by even 10-15%, if you're going to get scared by the news and withdraw all your money, then automatically the portfolio that you are trying to build is going to take a hit. So you'll not be able to do that. So are you able to withstand that volatility and have something called as holding power in the market? So if you're able to have that, that's something you need to have. And if not, then probably you'll be more inclined towards the traditional debt instruments.
Right, like could be FDs or debt funds or PPF. Speaking about the market falling and risk profile, sometimes people ask me, but how do I know what my risk profile is? And the obvious answer is, well, you get risk profile questionnaires which you can go through. But an even simpler answer to figure out whether equity is for you is, do you lose sleep at night? if
Exactly.
you have the money invested in equity. And if you do, then probably reduce the allocation. But of course, to get a more detailed answer, there are questionnaires that people can look at, which asks you hypothetical questions about, hey, if the market fell 10%,
Yeah.
what would you do? Would you put more money in? Would you withdraw
Right.
it? And if you answer saying, I would withdraw money, then your risk profile is probably lower than someone who says, no, I'll put more money in if the market falls.
Right.
So people should know where they stand on the risk profile spectrum as well. Right?
Absolutely.
So Ritesh, the FIRE number seems very attractive, but if you were to advise someone on retirement planning, how would you approach it?
Yeah, so I think the person has to really understand that what is their lifestyle right now, make an assumption for inflation. Whatever expenses they have now will get inflated in the future. They also have many other goals that they need to prioritize, like I mentioned, whether it's their car, vacation, marriage, etc., etc. So now the person, once they've understood, let's say they need about, in the same example, they need about 8 crores at the time they're 55, which is not really early retirement, considering a lot of people want to retire at 40, 45.
Yeah. Okay.
Now in that approach, now you have a number, say 50, 55,000 per month at, let's say, 8%. If you keep investing, you'll meet that 8 crore number. Now, how do you decide? So you have other goals as well. Someone might just say, no, I just can't even start with 55K. Okay, great. You start with the 30, 35K, go ahead and try and see that where after every 5 years, where are you? You know, you were supposed to be at, let's say, 2.5 CR, but you are at, let's say, 2. Now you can look at stepping up your investments. So it's more about stepping up, like, let's say, your SIPs or your lump sum amounts, because a lot of times we step up our expenses, but we forget to step up our investments.
Can you explain what step up investments means?
Right. So when you do an SIP, let's say of 10,000 every month, so you're investing 1,20,000 a year. Now, instead of 10,000 per month, maybe next year you step it up by 10%. So instead of 10,000, 10,000 plus 10%, you started off investing.
Yeah.
When you take this approach, before you know it, your corpus would have increased substantially. And generally, 8 to 10% is something that you get in increasing your salaries anyway. So coming back to the example, now the person knows that they have a portfolio. They have to start investing, let's say 40K. Now decide allocation between equity and debt and keep going from there and reassessing every 5 years. Now who knows, when the person is 35, 40, they might be able to still retire earlier than 55 or think, no, I still need another 4, 5 years. So that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, that's great. And just to give some numbers on this, on the step-up SIPs, if you put 10,000 in an SIP every month and you never stepped it up, at 12%, you can get 1 crore in about 20 years. If you do a 5% step-up, that makes it 18 years. And if you do a 10% step-up, that makes it 16 years. And people feel like, oh, but what's the difference between putting 10,000 and 11,000, right? But it makes a big difference because over time, that 10% is a much larger figure. Because your base becomes higher and higher.
Right.
So that compounding effect and increasing the amounts that you put in is extremely important. So Ritesh, let's suppose I'm 50, I've achieved my FIRE goal, I have my retirement corpus. Now let's see what we should do with it. Okay, so here goes. I'm going to give you my retirement corpus. This is it.
Yeah, I see it. This is your entire corpus.
Yes.
Okay. So I think two things, and I'll explain it, and then I'll probably ask for something. We look at a concept called sequence of return risk. One thing is maybe 8 to 10 years before you turn 50. That's one answer. Wherein if you have your allocation too much to equity, then it might be a problem. Towards when you're getting retired, you need to keep reducing your equity allocation and put it towards debt. Because, like for example, there was COVID or there was some large big event and a big chunk of your portfolio decreased. Now this jug or this corpus that you had would completely substantially reduce if you did not do that. The second phase is, this is your retirement corpus now, let's say. Now what do you have to do? And for that, I think I need 3 glasses for that. Okay, now that we have these 3 glasses, which are nothing but buckets that you can think about. This is your retirement corpus. So this is your, let's say, an 8 crore retirement corpus, same as an example, and you've turned 50. Now what can you do? Now these are 3 buckets, assume that. The first bucket will be your income bucket. Now this will be a bucket which will be much higher than the rest of the buckets. Let's say it's about 50 to 60%. Why is this important? Because for the first 5-8 years, you definitely need an income regularly for the withdrawal that you have to do for your expenses every month, which we talked about. Then you can have like a 25%, let's say an equity bucket. So this would be, let's say, 1/4 this glass. The reason is that you still want to take advantage a little bit about equity, where you'll get higher returns, maybe 10, 12%, even if you put it in index or balance funds, etc. Because you still want to beat inflation. Who knows what inflation will be at that point of time, but even if you assume 6, 7%. And you still have about 20, 25% again in your, let's say, emergency funds, or your budget, or your where you can actually withdraw when you have a large emergency. Of course, you may have health insurance, etc. But with rising medical expenses, you may have to exceed. Now, what really happens is when your the bucket will keep going up and down. Let's assume your equity bucket. In 5 years, your portfolio, it was 25%, has gone up now. So your bucket has increased a little bit, right?
Because let's say the stock market has gone up.
Right? Now, what will you do after that? Will you let this bucket, equity bucket, go up to top? No, because that's not what your risk allows you. So, you will rebalance. You will put a little bit back into your income, to your emergency, and a little bit back to your income fund, now income bucket. Now, you will see they again realigned. Let's say 50, 25, and 25. So, this is also important. Why? Because the sequence of return risk, which I spoke about, you had this 8 CR. Now, before retirement, you didn't need to withdraw, but post-retirement, you have to keep withdrawing. So, the base amount keeps going down and down every year, and you have to manage with the 3 buckets. This is just an example. So, that's how you would actually manage your corpus post-retirement.
Great. And how often would you say I need to rebalance post-retirement? 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I think 2 years, 3 years is good enough, where unless you've seen a large spike in your equity bucket, for example, then you want to rebalance, because you don't want to continue the risk. Why? Because you have to withdraw again, like we said, from your corpus.
Okay, great. And one more question about the income corpus. What sort of instruments or products would I have that in?
Right. So, at that point of time, you can still be okay with FDs or debt mutual funds or liquid funds or very, very aggressive conservative hybrid funds. So, these are all examples where, your risk is very limited. So, and you will definitely get that income. So, those are the kind of investments that you can actually have in your income bucket.
Okay. You did say, Ritesh, that you don't want to retire early. I think that's an important point, because everyone I speak to just wants to retire as early as possible. So can you tell us a little bit about personally why you wouldn't want to retire early, and what other people should be thinking about, 20, 25, 30-year-olds? Because it's really glamorous to say, oh, I retired at 40, 45. But what is it that they're really signing up for if they want to retire early?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when you're younger, in your 20s or even in your 30s, now this FIRE movement basically requires a few things. It definitely requires you to be frugal. So you need to have a lifestyle which is much lesser when you're in your 20s, 30s, and save up to, let's say, 50 to 70% of your income. If you can continuously do that for a long period of time, then maybe you'll reach early retirement.
And this is saving towards your retirement.
Just for retirement.
So this is not for any other aspect
goals
of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the idea is that you have to first understand that what does retirement mean? Does it mean that you're completely going to stop working or earning? Or does it mean that you're going to, continue your passions or basically maybe earn something but not earn the same amount, be able to do what you want to do?
Yeah.
What does retirement firstly mean for you? Because what are your core values? What are your goals? Like, for some people, the experiences matter more or material possessions. So how do you judge that? These are questions that someone has to ask themselves.
Right. In your experience, let's say with people who are pursuing FIRE, there must be a lot of peer pressure, right? To, oh, you're not coming out with us today. Why? Oh, because I put all my money towards my retirement. Or we're not going on a holiday because I've put my money towards retirement. Does this affect them psychologically, emotionally? Because I'm sure it must be quite a stressor as well, right?
That's an excellent question, because when you think about it, nothing should, it's an interesting take. Be frugal now, enjoy later. Enjoy a lot now, not be able to save too much later and live frugally then. And it does create a lot of stress and mental pressure as well. That's why I said, there are choices. This is all comes down to choices. For example, if you want to live frugally, you can probably, let's say, downsize your house. Maybe not buy that more expensive car. Then use the other money for your other experiences that you want, like you were mentioning.
Yeah.
But I feel that it's always in moderation, no extremes. You can't just save all your money and wish that when you're 60, when you may not even be healthy to enjoy that travel, then what's the point? So there has to be a balance that has to be...
So maybe think of it in a holistic perspective, that your life includes other things apart from your retirement planning as well.
Right.
Because experiences are important, right? I mean, we travel and we learn from that. We read books and we learn from that. We do activities and we learn from that. So maybe we want a holistic approach towards it. Ritesh, there are many people who have unconventional career paths. People who are self-employed. They don't draw a regular, stable monthly salary. Can they look forward to an early retirement or a reasonably early retirement? How would their financial retirement planning be different from a salaried person?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I have a couple of people in my family as well who are like freelancers or like in the media, and you're right, they don't get regular income. But I think 3 or 4 cornerstones. One is sort of building an emergency fund, because when you look at times when they won't have an income for, let's say, 6 months period, do they have enough to sustain? Now, we're talking about retirement, but something in today's day and age and present is more important. So let's say that's the first part. The second is definitely in terms of your health insurance, and why I say that is that a lot of times if you're not covered, one sort of emergency could wipe out your entire portfolio, because during an emergency you're not going to think about money. Now the third thing which I would say is that definitely they can also look towards an early retirement. I mean, if they're already doing like a freelancing job or like with the gig economy that's happening these days, but they have to again determine what do they want to do when they retire and what is the lifestyle that they will maintain. If they're able to assess that, then they can come up with a requisite or a number which actually makes sense and then continue. So that's how they can also plan it.
Yeah. So one sort of practical tip that I can suggest to people in this regard is, often freelancers or self-employed people don't know exactly how much they're getting, so they're scared to start an SIP. And that's important because if you don't start the SIP, then you're never sure if you're actually going to make the investments or not. So I often tell people then, figure out a number that you're monthly comfortable with that will just leave your account. And then there may be months where you can put in more, and then if those months do come about, you can manually make that extra investment. So that's one tip that people can use. Because let's face it, not everyone can invest as much as they need to all the time. So just because, suppose you need to invest 50,000 to reach your FIRE number, if you're not able to invest 50,000, it doesn't mean you don't invest at all, right? I mean, investing 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 is better than zero. So that's something for people to consider as well.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about economic downturns and, let's say maybe sudden events that could derail someone's retirement plan. We all go into the market knowing that there could be downturns, there could be crashes, slowdowns in the economy, recessions, etc. And I've noticed that people get really scared of this. So they'll listen to the TV or they'll read the newspaper, which will say, oh, there's a recession coming up. And so they'll feel, oh, I won't invest now, I'll wait for the recession to get over and then I'll start investing. So how should we start thinking about recessions and downturns in our retirement planning?
No, that's a good question. I think, and in the long run, it's important to zoom out than zoom in, is what I would say, because there will always be events which are, when you said, news-based or company-based. But remember, if I look at the last 20 years of even the market's history, barring 2008 and 2020, which were like the financial crisis and COVID, the market has actually fallen about 13 to 14% peak to trough every year. So, this is the kind of information that someone needs to know and be okay with, that I know that, in any given year, my investments can actually fall by 12 to 13%, but I should still continue to stay invested. But why? Because I have my long-term goal and I understand that I need that number, and therefore, if you do any back calculation, you need to keep investing. And like they say, more people have lost money waiting to invest than actually being invested.
Right. And also there's this saying that, all dips look like a challenge before they happen, but then from hindsight, they look like opportunities. So you want to put money in when the market is down, more money in when the market is down if you can, rather than not putting it in, expecting it to fall. Ritesh, do you know of anyone who's achieved early retirement, they're financially independent, but they've regretted the journey and the sacrifices they've had to make?
I mean, yes, in 2 instances, I'll tell you both sides of the story. One is where the person has retired early, but doesn't know what they want to do. Like they just, again, went with the movement, or let's say retire at 47, 48. But what are they going to plan to do with their lives post that is something which they do not thought about. So when you were in a job, you're meeting people, you had, you're socially meeting people, and that's also a need. You're going out for meetings and interacting. So maybe that's a missing piece. So that's one thing. The second case is where a person tried to retire early, like they've said they're retiring early, But one thing people fail to put in place is the impact of inflation, for example. Or maybe once they've retired, they had to go back to working for another 5-8 years.
Got it.
And let me take this with that same example that I did, earlier, or I shared earlier, with the same guy or the person who was 25 and wanted to retire at 55, and their corpus was, let's say, 8 crore that they needed at the age of 55. Now, just a 1% increase in inflation as an assumption from 6% to, let's say, 7% actually increases the retirement corpus from 8 to 12 crores. So that's a 50% increase.
Yeah.
And now there are, let's say, two options in the beginning. I mentioned that the person has 50,000 expenses per month, which translates to about 6 lakhs a year.
Yeah.
Say the person actually, instead of 50,000, has 60,000. And wants to have a lifestyle where they can spend 60,000. Now that corpus goes from 8 to about 9.5. On the reverse end, if it's about from 50,000 to 40,000, 10,000 lower, it's about again 1.5 crores lower. The problem is everything looks amazing in an Excel sheet. You can put up, down, numbers, metrics. But what do you really want, and how are you going to achieve that? And when you retired, so in both these cases, one had the enough money but didn't know what to do. The other case, the person thought they had enough money, but they didn't because they're going to live longer.
Right.
So that's why it's so unique from both perspectives.
By the way, expenses or income, which approach should one take? 25x expenses or 25x income?
It should be expenses. I go with the other approach where I said that you take all the assumptions, not like a blanket 25x, but that's what you see in general social media.
Just to start you off thinking about retirement, you can use the 25x of expenses formula. And you can think of the 4% withdrawal rule. But as you said, this is affected by various factors. You need to keep that in mind. And also, in the examples you just gave us, things could change.
Yeah. In fact, when you said things could change, that's an important factor, because today when that person is 25, and when they're 35 or 40, their expenses might have changed. Remember, in a country like India as well, now this concept was more in the US. In India, the way the social culture is there, people generally, take care of their parents. They also look at supporting them. So it's also about, let's say, when you're in your 40s or 50s, or when you want to retire, having honest conversations with your parents and understanding how much will they need, because that's something that people generally do. So that again, so when I said earlier, let's say that person had expenses of 50,000. Now assume you had another 30,000 for support of your family. Now your corpus, see how much you need. Are you going to still be able to retire at 40, 45? Or you will need to work till 50, 55? So this is again an example where someone needs to put that into account. And on the contrary, maybe children's expenses or your home loan EMIs may go away. So maybe that you don't have to cater for when you're already retired. So it's not today I said, I put this into the number, now I start. You have to reassess every 3, 4, 5 years and figure it out then.
Yeah, I think, I'm thinking about this. I don't think I've come across anyone who has kids who really speak so much about FIRE. Because the priorities then change, right? You're not thinking completely about retirement and your retirement. You're thinking firstly about the kids, and those expenses never go away. And the more that you do, probably the more you want to do above that, right, for them. And so maybe this is something that people have younger when they are earlier on in their career. But I'm not sure about that. Maybe I'm wrong about this.
No, I think again it just depends on different people and circumstances, wherein even people who have kids do think about retirement. But like you rightly said, now let's just, if you just break it down, completely, you only earn a certain amount of income per month. You have a certain amount of expenses you have to do. So let's say you earn 1 lakh and you have let's say 40, 50,000 expenses. You only have left 50,000. Now you have many goals, like you said. You have your car, your home, your vacation, your marriage, your kids' expenses, kids' marriage, all of that. Then you have retirement as well. Now, if you put everything together, it might just cross this 1 lakh as well of the income that you have. So now this is where prioritization comes into play. That's why in terms of, you want to early retire, you want to retire early also, but it might impact your other goals. So which is where someone should look at it holistically and just not, okay, great, FIRE, I want to retire early, but what about all the other goals? Are you willing to sacrifice all of them for retirement? Then great, that's your choice. But if not, then balance and have the goals and then retirement as well.
So I often tell people is, if you have enough money to satisfy all your goals, you usually don't need financial planning that much. And so usually the people who need financial planning are the ones who need to prioritize.
And it's like a mindset as well, because it might look fancy, let's retire early, all of that. Now it requires you to definitely be disciplined for like a 25-30 year period.
Yeah.
You'll have to track your income, track your expenses, create a budget, automate savings. Are you willing to do that month over month, year over year for 20 years? If you are, then you go on to this movement and figure it out. But if you're not going to be able to do that, which a majority of people don't really seem to be able to do that, then think about it. So these are all factors. Fire is just that number, and there's a saying. But what else goes along with it?
This reminds me of dieting, because it's very easy to start a diet, but it's difficult to sustain it, and probably the same thing with fire.
Exactly.
You must have so many people who start the journey, and then 1 year, 2 years down the line, give up on it. Maybe they realize it's not for them, and there's a better way, or maybe it's just too tough for them. They want to do it, but they can't do it.
Absolutely.
And that's okay. I mean, whatever works for you is fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
If someone wants to start their fire journey today, what questions should they ask themselves before they start?
Okay, so I'll give you 5 important questions that someone should ask. The first one is, what are your values? So do you prioritize experiences or do you prioritize material possessions? Where are you on this journey? Number 2, what are your actual goals? Do you want to just retire, have no income, sit at home, let's say just watch Netflix and just chill, or you want to pursue your passion, or you want to help society, etc.? What are your actual goals? Number 3 would be that are you ready to be frugal? Because the whole tenet of FIRE is that you need to save at least 50 to 70% of your income throughout a very long-term journey. So are you ready to do that? Number 4, are you ready to become balanced and in terms of discipline? Because it will require 20 to 25 years of you to track your expenses, create a budget, keep investing, go against, let's say, be okay with market volatility. Are you okay with all of that? And number 5, that let's say, do you even have a support system? Are you looking at all the factors involved? Let's say, like your parents are involved, do you need to support them? Do you have friends, family? Are you doing it out of FOMO, or are you actually doing it because it really means something to you? So I think these 5 things, and there are many more, but these 5 specific things someone should ask before just watching any reel or watching any sort of video which just says, okay, this is your number, now start today. That's what I would say.
Okay. Thanks a lot for spending time with us and sharing your expertise on retirement planning. I think that's a lot of great information for people to start their journey on. It was great having you on.
Thanks, Aditya. It was a great conversation.
Thanks a lot for watching this episode of Temperament. At what age do you want to retire, and what's your FIRE number? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you in the next episode.